rooms. There is running water, luckily. That was one of the things that the people were very grateful. But there's no showers because there's no showers at work. There's no change of clothes. So even if you could take a shower, what would you change into? There's no way to wash your clothes because if you did, what would you wear while they were washing? How would you dry them? It is truly hell. So that brings us to the question, why? Why would China do this for a disease that just gives you a trickle, a little trickle of nose trickle, just a little cold? Why? The answer is they wouldn't. It makes no sense. They would have to be crazy to do that. They know of something else. That's the only way it makes sense. They're using COVID, Omicron, BA2 as the excuse, but in other words, they have caught wind of a virus that is so deadly it is unimaginable. And that's not, I don't have any facts to back that up. So I am not telling you to bet your money on it, but I will remind everybody again, I'm the only person you know who in October of 2019 told his real estate agent there is a disease and a war coming, either one or the other or both, and it turns out it was both. But I said it's coming, and Trump will not know how to handle it, and he will be the cause of it, which of course he was by not stopping the Chinese from coming into the country. During the period he told us he had a blockade against the Chinese up 429,000 people came here from China. Well, if you're hiding from a disease, but you let in 429,000 people, you get what we got, which was, how many million? I think 1.2 million right now have died from it. 1.2 million have died. And is it something like that? And I'll look that up while I'm talking to you. So there was no need for that. We could have kept it out if we had, well, wait a minute. We could have kept it out to a large degree. And remember with COVID, the name of the game was delay. Delay. That was what we were trying to do because the longer we delayed it from getting into the U.S., the sooner the vaccine could take effect. So, in other words, we wanted to, if possible, prevent the large numbers of people from getting COVID until we had a vaccine that would not stop them from getting sick, because that's not what vaccines do, but would stop them from getting seriously ill and dying, which is what vaccines are supposed to do. So anyone who has a vaccine that prevents people from getting seriously ill and dying has a very successful vaccine. So what is it that the Chinese have? We can only speculate. We have no facts to base that on. But again, I'm the person who told everybody who would listen in February of 2020 that this thing is going to be, look at the name of the podcast, The End of the World. Well, it's not the end of the world, but it sure looks close to it. And it could have been if the vaccines had not panned out. If we'd only had the Sinovac, the Chinese useless vaccine, the Russian vaccine, which did nothing, if we'd only had those two, we'd have 20 or 30% of the world's people dead right now. But luckily we got the Moderna and the Pfizer, and those do work. They work incredibly well. And we also had people who were smart enough to realize that masks worked with those earlier versions of COVID. Apparently masks do not work with the current COVID. Only the N95 masks, which are the really, really expensive, good ones, which stop almost anything from getting through them, only those will prevent this horrible Omicron disease. Now, do we have a preview of what it is? England says we've already seen the new version, and it's called the XE. And it is far more contagious than the last Omicron 2, which we said was the most contagious thing we'd ever seen. This one is 10 times more contagious. So it is as contagious or even more contagious than measles, which if you've ever danced the dance with measles, you'll know that it's terrible. So the new COVID that's coming, maybe the Chinese are worried about the XE, but there is no evidence to anybody in the UK who has it that it is any more of a danger than anything else. There's nothing that says it's going to be hyper deadly. So my belief is that the Chinese have discovered another disease. It may not even have anything to do with COVID. It may be just another variation of a disease. You know, I spend my whole life worrying about what would happen. I know what would happen, but I'm worrying that rabies will just make that small change. Well, it's a big change, and become airborne, where you could catch it from somebody sneezing. There's a movie about that I've seen, and it was pretty bad. But right now, rabies could not do that. Rabies, you have to really have close contact. You have to be blood-to-blood contact, pretty much, to catch rabies. So we don't worry right now about catching rabies. And, of course, if you get bitten, there's a period of time where you can get shots, painful shots in the stomach, that will turn the rabies around. But what if it became airborne? That would be the end of the world. Now, a really interesting question that people play at trivia on, I think it's Tuesday night in England. People would sometimes talk about, there's all the zombies movies, Day of the Zombies, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Dawn of the Day of the Dead, The Dead in Europe, 74, all that kind of horse manure. And the question would be, is there any, forget movies, is there any disease that in real life could give us an army of zombies like that? An army of 1,000 people or 10,000 walking down the street, crazy, bitten, missing parts from being bitten and fighting and looking for other people who are not bitten to bite. Is there any disease that could do that? And the answer is yes, there is one that could do that, and it's rabies. Well, rabies is not airborne, but maybe what if the Chinese have found airborne rabies? Okay, that'd be one. What if it's just a new COVID that, if you remember how COVID started in the beginning, it actually got people very close to death within hours of them realizing they were sick. That's how it did such a terrible job. The people did not even know they were sick. They're going to work, and before they would go home, they would be deathly ill. And that's one of the things that made this COVID a disaster like we've never seen. It's like we've never seen anything like it, because in every other disease that I know of and that we've seen as we've grown up is that you're not contagious until you start coming down with the disease. So until you start feeling shitty, we don't have to worry about you giving it to other people. COVID was the first one that I know of that didn't work that way at all. It had 5 fucking days that you could catch it. It would start working through your body. You could give it to other people. And then after 5 days, you started saying, I don't feel good. And by then, your lungs were completely filled with the storm, your body trying to fight off the infection, and there was, at first, nothing people could do. Luckily, somebody realized that steroids helped, and it went from there. But have the Chinese discovered something terrible, and they're just trying to stamp it out? Now, that raises the next question, which I really wish we could have some sort of roundtable on, because I think it's such a good question. And that is, the current number is 46. That's how many cities in China are either under partial or total lockdown as of Saturday afternoon, 23rd. Question: How can you stop the spread of a virus from one city to another? How is that possible? I mean, you would have to stop every person in each of the 45 cities from leaving the city to go anywhere. I guess that's what they're doing. And you would have to have them in there until the virus goes away. But if the virus isn't there, then what you're doing is ridiculous. If the virus is there, it won't go away until they've all caught it. This thing is so contagious that if 2% of the population in Guangzhou in China have it, I think that's a city, even though it would be under total lockdown, it would spread because the people are still going out to get their box of vegetables and groceries, and I see demonstrations where they're going out to fight with the police, and there's just standard communal exchanges where, people are with their family and talking to each other, and you can't stop a virus that way. And at first, the medical help on TV was saying, this is weird. Why are they even trying? Everybody knows you cannot stop a virus that way. Why does China have a program called the Zero COVID program? You can't do that. It's impossible. There is no place else in the world that is saying we're going to get COVID down to zero. And then it went from crazy to crazy military to where everybody in the world is locked down in Shanghai. And they are not getting out of their apartments. They're staying at work. And I feel so terrible for them when I watch the videos of the people out on the balconies of their apartments. And I think, well, that's a nice apartment. I wish I had that place. But look at that. What a view. It's got to be the 30th floor. But anyway, they're out on there and they're screaming to each other about, we have no food. And the other ones are yelling, hang in there. And they're all trying to, they are making trade centers so that if you have, let's say, 6 oranges, you could go there and get a pound of, let's say, onions and maybe 2 pounds of mushrooms and a half a pound of pig. So there are places where the people are being clever and exchanging food with each other in order to try and get by, but you cannot isolate COVID. The question is that what they're trying to do, or do they know of something that we don't? Again, as of the last few little minutes, the source that I watch says the hospital parking lots are not filling up yet. So that's the good sign. It's the bad sign is when they say, uh-oh, all the hospitals are full of cars, every parking lot, and there's now people flooding trying to get in, and the police are shooting them because they're not allowed to get in or out of their house. But I just wanted to make sure you understood how dire the situation is, that people who, even though they're doing the right thing, and they've been in their house for 5 days since they tested positive for COVID, they haven't gone anywhere, they still have to endure the Chinese government knocking down their front door at 2 a.m. and saying, we're taking you to the COVID concentration camp, which they don't call it that. They call it something else, information center or something like that. But it's just a way station for whatever it is that's coming. Thank you for